Okay, well, thank you all for joining today. Again, my name is Martin Schneider. I've been a CRM analyst analyzing the development of CRM technology, but even more importantly, the deployment of CRM technology among companies of all sizes, of all shapes, all geographies, all industries for about 20 years now. And right now, there's a really interesting time of change and necessity for CRM. So let's just jump right into it and talk about how we can take some of the trends that are happening today, some of the market drivers, and then the technology supporting that, and really mix that into a blueprint, of course, for CRM success, as the title suggests. So as a form of agenda today, I'd like to talk very quickly about why CRM matters more than ever. Really, if you're listening now and you're not deploying CRM, it really is the right time to get started. You really need a partner for CRM, and that's around choosing a vendor and having a checklist. And those two parts there, we'll talk about what you should be thinking of, what your mindset should be to make the best decision and the best partnership, so that you have a future-proof CRM deployment and one that really works with you down the road. Talk about some adoption tips and tricks. As anyone who's on the webinar who has been through a CRM deployment knows, adoption can be the kind of silent killer, right? It can make or break your CRM initiative, and we'll talk about some things that you can do to make sure it makes it, not breaks it. Finally, a lot of times what we see is people that have deployed a CRM thinking it was successful, and they don't really know how to show either to their own team or to management or executive staff, or even just to know how successful it was, what metrics to use. So we'll talk about some deployment metrics that you can set, some baselines, some milestones, if you will, so that you know just how well the deployment is going after a few months, maybe even a few years. And then finally, I'll take some of your questions. As Tim probably noted, if you have questions, you all will be in listen-only mode. Write them in the chat bar, and we'll get to them at the end. Okay, so let's begin. So CRM. Before, CRM was kind of a commodified concept for a long time. It was an empty database, a tool for grabbing activities and data, and it was important, but it wasn't necessarily a competitive differentiator because a lot of it was the same. But nowadays, CRM is becoming a competitive differentiator for a lot of companies in a lot of industries for a lot of reasons. Why does it matter? I mean, you obviously get that CRM is important. You're on this webinar today, but the important thing is that CRM is changing in kind of what it is at a DNA level in order to help you do some really cool things around the customer experience. And right now, as we have a kind of race to the bottom in pricing and ease of, what they call frictionless commerce, ease of buying, customer choice, the internet-based building, digital upstarts, all those types of things that might be forcing you to think differently, forcing you to transform, disrupting your business. Customer experience is the one thing where you can differentiate, connect with your customers, create customers for life, and just beat the competition. Almost 9 in 10 companies see customer experience, or CX as I will refer to it probably often on this webinar, as a primary differentiator. That's just from Gartner research. It's about 5 to 10%. You can get serious lifts in revenue if you are a leader in customer experience. You do better than your competitors if your customers feel like they trust you, if they feel like you're giving them the right experience, and they want to do business with you. It's about partnership and what we call joining rather than buying nowadays. It's kind of a cultural shift that we're seeing, right? And then always a CRM as both a sales automation and kind of B2B sense, but also in the customer support and customer relationship sense, you need to provide consistency across the life cycle because 1 in 4 customers, they'll leave you and never come back after just one bad experience. So the need in this hyper competitive, hyper connected customer environment is obviously there. But how do you differentiate when you're thinking, well, if everybody thinks CX is important, aren't we all just going to go grab CRM, put it in place, and then, we'll all be the same again, but a little bit different because we'll just be digitally the same? Well, not exactly. I mean, you have to think of your CRM initiative beyond the technology, beyond it just being something that you take and in a cookie cutter way deploy. Because sameness, as it says here, sameness is the enemy of success, right? If you're doing the same thing, if you're using the same technology, if you're just kind of mimicking everybody else either in your industry or even in your area, you are going to look the same as them, and you're not going to have a competitive differentiation. You need to be a game changer, right? What does that mean? It means you need to leverage technology in ways that don't necessarily recapitulate the processes and the experiences and maybe make them a little easier. It's really about changing them and thinking about, how do I fundamentally take an experience my customers had and make that not just easier, but better or fundamentally different and different from my competitors. There's a lot of, when you think of how the iPad really changed the way a lot of point of sale and other, in-person sales engagements happen. Before, you might give someone a form and hope they filled it out. Then we thought, okay, well, we'll fill out the form for them. Now, with an iPad and CRM technology on that, you can interactively leverage that form, pull interesting, visual and rich media-based tools to drive which product assortment you're doing, and all these really cool things that again, it's not just because of the technology, it's about how you're applying the technology and changing the game of sales or customer support or marketing. And again, to do that, just like talking about when we're using innovative devices like iPads into the mix, you need to leverage modern, innovative CRM. A lot of products out there have been around for 30 plus years now. It seems crazy, but it's true. And they haven't changed all that much. Their marketing may have changed, their branding may have changed, and their taglines may have changed. But when you scrutinize the technology, a lot of it's the same. So you need to go out there and find out what's new and what's innovative and what's really going to help you be that game changer. Okay, choosing the right CRM vendor. Now, I like to say that the vendor is about, it's the first last mile in that the technology is important, and it used to be not important because so much of it was the same. It was really about your vision, the partner or let's call it the deployment resources you were using to take that technology and do interesting things with it. But nowadays, in such a kind of wide choice environment with some very older legacy vendors, with some new upstart vendors that are very small, and then some kind of mid-sized mature but innovative vendors out there, it's really, you need to make the right choice depending on what you're looking to do. And what's important to think about when working with a CRM provider is finding one that should and does scale with your business. It's not always important to start big with a CRM deployment, even if you're one of the biggest companies in the world. I've worked with the largest companies in the world on their CRM deployments, and they didn't always start with 10, 15, 20,000 user deployments. Sometimes it's 10, 15, 20 user deployments to make sure it works, but obviously knowing that the product can scale on the back end. You need a breadth of functionality. All too often, the pain that's felt is what decides what product gets felt, and the pain you're feeling now might grow or might have tentacles into other departments, other use cases. And a lot of times there's little products out there that might be really good at solving your pipeline visibility, but they don't do anything else. And they don't necessarily have an ecosystem or an integration platform that allows you to build on that and to interoperate with your ERP system or, contract and order management systems. But they really do give you great pipeline visibility, and there's no doubting that. But what else do they do? And when you think long-term, when you think CRM is a journey, not a destination, you really need to think about a breadth of functionality in a platform, and we'll talk a lot more about platform later. And then obviously, again, sameness is the enemy of success. You can't just take a cookie-cutter product and think it's going to make you different. So you really need to be able to configure or customize. I prefer configuration these days. The cloud and cloud-based platforms make it easier than ever to do what I would call click configuration rather than code-based and programming customization. That allows for faster and easier upgrades, easier management, changing the product to fit pretty quick changing business needs nowadays. And thinking of, and asking questions around, how do I configure this? And make sure the language that provider uses is more around configuration a lot of times than customization. Because technically, you can get into code and customize anything to do anything. But do you really want to learn a new proprietary language or have to hire someone who does and add costs and complexity to your deployment and your IT development staff? Or do you want to be able to go in there, select from a drop down, fill the new name of a field in, for example, and make that work in minutes, right? That's the preference these days. In addition, it really needs to fit your business process, not the other way around. I mean, that's the problem. Is a lot of times you'll talk to a vendor and say, well, what's your workflow? What's your business process automation? You say, oh, we have workflows, but they're kind of hardwired out of the box. You have to comply to them, not the other way around. So make sure that from a workflow and process perspective, because as we think about end-to-end omni-channel processes, all these buzzwords, it's really important to think about, how do I have a highly configurable tool that I can define processes, that I can attach business rules to anything, that I can do many to one, one to many, one to one, many to many, all those things, and do that in a drag and drop, again, configure environment, not heavy customization where you're building these deeply coded workflows. It really needs to be dead simple, right? And again, you really want that, again, because that shows that they understand the changing nature and the modern pace of business. Now let's talk about integration, and platform. A lot of times a vendor will have a lot of products. They'll say, okay, well, this is our marketing tool. This is our customer service or call center tool. This is our sales automation. This is a configure price quote tool. And they have all those cool things, but are they on a single integrated platform? Often that's not the case, especially with your older legacy, big giant vendors out there in the space. We don't need to name their names. You probably know who I'm talking about. And they've acquired through mergers and acquisitions and other tweaks to the product, these kind of monolithic and huge behemoth products, but they're not integrated on a common platform. So that when you make one configuration in that console I described a little bit ago, it kind of waterfalls down to everything. So you're doing kind of write once, appear many times type concept there, saves a lot of time, saves a lot of complexity. And it really needs to be integrated. And again, you need a trusted expert. Again, it's a journey, not a destination. A lot of times the bigger vendors, they've got big relationships with big companies. If you're a smaller company, you're looked at as a number and they're selling you product as a manufacturer. The service side of software as a service gets lost from a lot of the big vendors. It really is about being there every step of the way. Having a customer success culture and really scrutinizing that vendor to ask them, do you know who my customer success manager is going to be and what's my customer success plan? And if they can't give you a detailed plan, you might want to rethink that relationship. So when you're thinking of a vendor, what are those key technology concepts? Short of features, right? These are more technology concepts. We'll get into features in a moment. Again, we really need to start thinking about end-to-end process optimization, not just automation, where you're giving visibility, where you're giving the ability to take action for a lot of people along the customer lifecycle. CRM previously was very siloed. It was very monolithic. You had your sales product, which was really great, and they still are, about managing an opportunity, a sales deal from sourcing to beginning to close. That's great. But really, the customer doesn't get much of that. They're not involved in a lot of that. A lot of that's happening on your side of the business. But when you really think about a customer relationship management platform and product, you really need to be thinking about, how does the customer engage with us? What is their experience and where does it touch this technology and this data and information so that I can really improve their overall experience, set their expectations, and provide consistency, if not really great experiences all the time. So an intuitive user experience. Now again, whether that's being pushed out to the customer or being used by employees, it's got to be great. Something can be super feature rich out there. Some of the products out there, they have every feature checkbox that you could possibly imagine, and 90% of them you'll never use. But if the look and the feel and getting to the things you need isn't simple, if it doesn't take one swipe or a click, depending on if you're using the mouse or a touch screen, how good is it really? And again, workflow automation. It's got to be something that you can control easily. Make new process flows, tweaking process flows, and edit them, in minutes, not days, weeks, or months. And then process alignment. Again, it's really about aligning the business processes of multiple departments so that everybody's on the same page. Because again, a lot of times when you buy a product that has a bunch of different kind of sub-products to get to that end-to-end, this workflow stops here and can't be continued into the next department or the next phase of the customer lifecycle. That is a bad thing. You need to make sure that will not happen for you. And again, platform is always important. Point products, as I like to call them, little point solutions, things like I said, do pipeline really well. They might do web self-service really, really well. But that's not the entirety of the customer lifecycle. And you want to have something that, even if it's not going to do all those things, those little products can plug into that. So you might use one of those little products if the CRM core platform doesn't do that amazingly or at your budget, but you need to make sure that those little products and those touch points for the customer can plug into the core platform. So really think of the core platform first, and then maybe later, from a best of breed approach, how those other little products kind of plug in. Because thinking the other way around can sometimes get you into trouble. And again, anytime, anywhere access. Mobility is important, but again, when you think about integrated platforms, the mobile has to be a part of that. It can't be a bolt-on afterthought. It needs to be seamlessly integrated. And why is that? Well, obviously, your processes, your connections, your interactions, all those things should be in a seamless flow. And it's not about, okay, well, I'm going to capture this, then I'm going to sync it back, and then hope that flows into the data at some point. No, it's got to be available, and it has to be available offline as well. You need to have really robust offline access, because even in 2019, it's not always an afterthought. It's not always promised that you're going to have great connectivity to a cloud delivered system. So you need offline access from a mobile use case. Sometimes we have deployments where people go into the basements of hospitals because that's where the machinery is and the X-ray machinery, and they just don't have access to these old buildings, things like in the center of cities. People who go out there and do things like oil and gas, and they're out there in the middle of nowhere in these oil fields. They don't have access. So it's really important to have that offline access to capture data, make sure it's correct, and when you automatically sync it, you're saving time, you're saving steps in the process rather than doing that manually. So really simple stuff there, but stuff to look for when you're evaluating a vendor. Okay, so in your evaluation, what are the kind of things you need to be thinking about, other than just those kind of high-level things around what the vendor is? So let's think about the features that matter. What are the table stakes when it comes to a CRM vendor and what they can do for you, especially in a kind of a phase one deployment? Sales automation, obviously, right? If you're a B2B organization, you're more than likely managing opportunities that have a certain sales cycle, whether they're 3 days or 3 years sometimes. You want to manage that life cycle in a really nice system that can give you process automation, alerts, notifications, great forecasting, all that kind of stuff, right? Lead management. You really need to be able to, whether you're using a marketing automation system that is separate from the quote-unquote CRM or not, that lead management needs to go beyond simply kicking a lead over to sales, right? You need to be able to have really, really nice lead conversion and then a lot of reporting around what are those conversion ratios. Case management and self-service. Again, you might not be running a 10,000-person global call center that's broken up into 500-seat bullpens of support agents and CSRs, but you do need to make sure that even sometimes before the sale, there's issues that happen. So case management fully integrated with the sales management and the lead management, so you can see what that customer is doing, especially in a repeat business, recurring customer, subscription economy world. Because if you're not seeing the issues that a customer might be having with the other departments, and you're a salesperson, you hate being ambushed. You hate going in there and saying, hey, how about renewing our contract? And they're like, hey, man, we just called you yesterday about 3 huge problems with the machinery. Why would we buy from you again? Or why would we continue a contract? Anything like that. You want to have the 360-degree view that we've been talking about forever. Workflow automation. Again, a lot of CRM products still don't have embedded seamless workflow with visual process designers, with process definitions and business rules that are highly configurable, not needing to be coded, and they're not integrated. So a lot of times you'll buy a sales automation product, you want to get that workflow going to make either escalations or handoffs or to escalate cases into other things, or you want to have some of your product people do customer support, so there's some workflow, and the workflow is just not there. So you got to make sure that workflow is inside that core platform. Integration, obviously important. Open, well-documented APIs that are backwards compatible all the time, right? It's, again, 2019, but it's shocking how many times I'll talk with people out there and they're saying, okay, well, we really wanted to integrate with this legacy system, but this little product didn't have the way to do it. They only had, 3 or 4 connectors to other little tools. Or the other times are, there's some external data sources, but this is a premise-based product and it doesn't allow us to open that up. It just happens. So you really need an open, super simple integration product, but highly powerful. RESTful web services as well as SOAP, whatever it takes, because you might have very old legacy systems, ERP tools that you're not ready to change, but you do want that front end of the customer experience to be modern and intuitive. So a really nice integration that can take in both different types of applications, third-party, legacy, but also data sources, legacy data warehouses, because you want to make sure you're doing segmentation on maybe a daily basis. You need that speed and scale of integration. And then again, usability and UX. Again, it's not necessarily a feature, but it is. It's kind of the Uber feature, the skin of the product. How does it look? How does it feel? User testing even before making a kind of long-term decision, super important. Because if your frontline employees don't like using it, it's not going to be a successful deployment. So make sure that it's highly intuitive. Make sure common things like logging a case, creating an opportunity, take 1, 2, 3 clicks, not 20 minutes, like some of the older products out there. One of the new things we're seeing is relationship intelligence come together as a kind of subcategory of CRM. How much interesting data and insights around your prospects and customers can you surface in the CRM without any effort? It's not about having to go in and buy lists and download them and look at them inside the CRM and then push campaigns out of there. It's like, no, how do I get alerts, notifications? How do I fill my CRM system with data almost instantly without all that manual entry, so I get more insights, so I understand the customer better? How do I do all that in a really intuitive way? That's relationship intelligence. Not a lot of vendors out there have it, but it's important to think about, because that's the next level, right? The data and the insights are what's taking CRM from a kind of commodity, an empty database and application skins, into really being competitive differentiators for your business. And again, dig a little more on platform, because when you start looking at the platforms, you got to think about, there's customization or configuration for space. I just have customization here, but it's really important that extension as well. I've talked a lot about config and customize, but extension is important as well. A lot of times what I see is people will take a product like Sugar, for example, that has its module builder, and you can create an HR tracking tool that doesn't extend the cost of your system very much. You might have one HR user that you add for a couple more dollars a month, instead of going out there, because you're not doing, you don't need a big giant monolithic HR product out there. You need to just track, maybe 50 applications that you get every few months, because you hire 5 people a year if you're a small or mid-sized business. You can extend that because the same tracking process follows the same opportunity close process. So extending the value of your CRM requires a platform that allows you to extend the value of it. So make sure you check on that, because sometimes it's really important and it's a really nice value driver, and it helps you kind of sell internally the value of it. Sometimes you do need, for those larger or much more customized deployments that are specialized, you need code base or source code access. It's important to know you can get that. It's a business continuity thing. Just like application hosting. Can I host this myself if I need to? Can you, the vendor, host it? Can third parties, my deployment partner, my VAR or systems integrator, host it? Is it a cloud portable solution? A lot of them are not, right? There's really only 1 or 2 that are out there. Is it single or multi-tenant? That might matter to you, that might not. Really, the idea is, do I have the option of being single instance, maybe, like Sugar CRM calls it, for example, premium cloud, where you get a lot of dedication in that instance if you don't want your data in a multi-tenant environment. Or you're okay with that. You're not in a heavily regulated industry, and the lower cost of your typical SaaS products is fine with you. Security and compliance. That's always kind of a moving target. Again, are you in a regulated industry? Are you do you have a lot of customer data that's really important to you? Have there been breaches from your competitors? And you want to make a differentiation because you can say, we definitely won't lose your data to hackers, right? So ask your vendors really deep questions about security and compliance. Make sure that's in your RFI, RFP. Now, the pricing, again, a lot of times the TCO, when you think about the application, someone will have a sales cloud or a marketing cloud, and those applications are priced a certain way. But sometimes to get down into the platform, you need to pay more. You need to buy developer licenses. You need to be doing a lot of different things from a cost perspective that, again, is going to increase your total cost of ownership over time and increase the complexity of that environment. You want to do something like Sugar, for example. The platform is just there. Like I said, you want to make that HR app. You don't have to buy developer licenses. You just go into the admin screen and make it in the module builder. Pretty simple stuff, right? And then, that's the idea. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. One of the things I do want to get into is data privacy. It's really important. I mean, it's a different thing than security and compliance. Make sure that the product has a set module or a set tool that allows you to manage data privacy requests from your customer. If people are listening to us internationally, especially in Europe, you've probably dealt or dealing with GDPR. Google was just fined, I think, $57 million US, 50 million euro for a data privacy, for not storing data privacy correctly, or not storing data correctly and not handling data privacy requests correctly. It's a mouthful. So make sure that the vendor offers data privacy modules or whatever you want to call it, so that you can automate or at least manage and audit these data privacy requests, as well as maintain data privacy in the application. You can delete someone's record in a lot of CRM products, but then someone else besides you, if they have access, they can just add that. Or if you buy a list or do other things, you want to make sure that a data privacy module will make sure that you essentially kind of fill the slot of the personally identifiable information or PII fields so that you can't be out of compliance. It's a really important thing. With all the fines, with all the regulations, ask about data privacy. Ask early, ask often. So let's start thinking about getting in deployment. You've kind of made your vendor selection maybe, or at least you're close to that. You're starting to put down some plans. You've got all that together. Now, adoption is really where it becomes the critical part, because where we see the biggest pitfalls are when people don't properly plan for, adoption, whether that's by doing too much too early in terms of configuring screens, not communicating that this product is going to be deployed inside the organization until like a couple weeks, because people don't want to hear the backlash. They just want to push it out there and kind of make it more of the stick than the carrot in terms of incentives to get salespeople to use it. But really, it's about, it's important to have an early focus area, and everyone that is going to use this needs to be on board well before you start deploying software. You need to select champions. That's the first thing. Now, one of the things that, people say, well, who's the champion? And it's always a good question, and it kind of depends on your business and the use case. If you're deploying in customer service first, you usually want to pick that, not only the best, say, customer service rep, but also, I hate to say it this way, the worst. Because or the loudest complainer is what you find. If there's the salesperson that seems the least resistant to change, convert that person first. Because when you turn the curmudgeons into champions, you get a voice that people will listen to saying, well, this guy's okay with it. Or she's gonna, be excited about this. Maybe I will be too. Or maybe I'll look at some value in this. And it's, about a what's in it for me. So often, CRM is deployed for a bulk of the reason being visibility to management and to executives, and for planning and for predictability. And those are very, very, very important aspects of why deploying a CRM. Being able to understand, the business operations is critical. But really, as we get into this new phase, the customer experience side of it and the user experience side of it, and the user seeing the benefit of it literally every day, and not something that they have to go and put data in on Fridays in order to get their commissions. That's the change we're looking to see. So if you can show people saying, hey, look, if you can go in here, use the CRM, close the deals earlier, you're going to get your commissions earlier, or whatever it is, and some of that revolves around some cultural change around making the employees more incentivized by design, either because they're getting financially compensated, or there's gamification inside, and you're recognizing people that use it. But the idea is making sure they know what's in it for them very early. Sometimes you see adoption lags, you start to throw kind of contests or other things together, kind of carrot and stick things, and it might be too late. So really, even before you go live, before you get even into user testing. And again, what's really important is make sure that you align, top line shared company goals and issues to the deployment of the software. So again, if you're, it kind of aligns with the what's in it for me. If people are saying, hey, we've been tasked with getting revenue to so-and-so, and we haven't added any more salespeople, if you can align and say, hey, if this tool, if we've got this, data service inside the CRM with relationship intelligence, and you're saving 20 to 50 minutes before every initial call that you're prospecting, and you can do 10 more of those, a week than you would, and you typically close 3 to 5 of the 10 you do, you're almost doubling your business, right? In terms of what you're bringing in as a salesperson, and you're aligning with the top line goals, you're incentivizing and showing the what's in it for me, and you're getting people to see the value very early. And then you're building the product to support that, obviously. And then it's important to assemble your A team. Really, again, once you've got the champions, you really need to have a top-down and a bottom-up approach. The people that work with customers the most need to be bought in the most, and then your most respected executives need to be vocal about it. A lot of times, it's typical, right? You've got that person where you need people to follow on to something. You need them to get something done, and they're not listening. And you ask that person to email out the message, and then all of a sudden, magically, it gets done. When those types of people in your organization are vocal about the value of the CRM deployment, things happen, and it's really important as an adoption driver, of culture. You got to point this out and say, hey, look, this is something that is going to be ingrained into the sales culture here, into the support culture here. This isn't a tool that you may or may not use. No, this is going to be a platform that we're running the business on in some ways. And when you communicate it that way early, and then again, obviously pepper it with, but the great thing about it is that you're going to save 5 hours a week because you're no longer going to be searching for data. You're no longer going to be Googling everybody. All that information is going to be in the system with the click of a button. That gets exciting. And the A team, the people that can be most vociferous about that, the guys who are going to amplify the message, that's who you got to get involved early. And, you get your A team together, you start to do not even user testing. It's really kind of, you get almost kind of internal meetups. You talk about it. You start to sketch. I mean, this isn't in technology or anything yet. You're practically just writing things down on whiteboards and taking notes that then go out into the project plan. And you do this really early. When the A team gets together and meets with these departments that are going to be affected, and they're asking real questions, and they're listening, and they're understanding, what are your requirements? What are your needs? And you're building that, not saying, here's what the technology can do. Does that help you? No, it's the other way around. It's, here's our requirements. Let's put that to the technology task, right? And that's the idea, because now you've listened to everybody. You've turned the curmudgeons into champions, created an A team that's both top down and bottoms up, so that, people are listening. You've got the grassroots. It's like Paul Greenberg says on the previous slide. It's like a political movement, right? You need power at the top, but you also need people, in the grassroots communicating the benefits. You put that together, you get the requirements, and you start putting a plan together that's much more aligned with the reality of business, with the reality of the everyday life of the end user. Because a lot of times, you start to configure software without really involving them, and it starts to get taken out of context and out of their reality. So what are the metrics that you can start using? Again, so many times we get people that come to us and they say, look, we've been using CRM for a couple of years now. We think it's valuable. We really like it, but it's hard for us to articulate how well we've done. And it's important to be able to show how well the system is working for a lot of different reasons. You want to move to a new department and add that software to it. You're going to have decision makers and financial kind of gatekeepers. You need to be able to prove the value with data. You need to be able to do that both qualitatively with the user saying we love it, but then quantitatively showing the ROI. So when you start to think about it, and I won't go into every one of these, it's kind of an eye chart here, and I get that. But the idea is there's two different types. There's kind of the business outcomes and then what I call the operational outcomes. These are a little different because one is about the business itself, right? How much more money are we making because we use this technology, right? How much more productive are our employees because we have this technology in place? And then the operational is what we call the kind of the success of the deployment itself. How many people are using it? How often are they using it? That kind of thing. So pipeline visibility, those types of things, conversion rates. These are easy things to start to look at. But what's important now is, sometimes you're not measuring them well now. But you can't start from zero. So you obviously know how many deals you closed, how many, those types of things. So you can always figure out, okay, how many customers did we close in the year before or the quarter before we started deploying this? That's your baseline. Really simple to do. And then you start to look at that over there. Now, sales performance. You know that you are compensating your salespeople on what they've closed. So when you start to look at closed deals per rep inside a quarter, or then you can start to look at, you might not have visibility in this, so you kind of have to start with a bit of a zero baseline, but how many opportunities originated and were closed inside the quarter? Those are great ones because then you start to understand how is marketing aligning with sales. Those types, you start to see this alignment in your departments that's really exciting, and you start to get these, these metrics that you can start to build off of on a sometimes weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually basis, and it's really great for business optimization. SLA compliance, that's just an important one, right? You want to be able to measure that for your customers, but you also want to be able to understand how are we hitting against that and where are we falling down and what's causing that. And the CRM system around customer support is a great way to find root cause about that. Operational, surveys are a great way to do that, but a lot of times these SaaS products out there say around usage rate and all those types of things and interaction intervals. A lot of that can be measured in the system, and the reporting capabilities of a CRM will give you that, right? Employee satisfaction, a lot of times you need to, you obviously need to do surveys, both in the automated sense, maybe using, a survey tool, but also make sure you're checking in with the user saying, what's working, what's not, what's changed in the business that might be tweaking that. Again, a lot of these are around, the way the system works. Sometimes interaction intervals, is it the system or is it our, how many employees we have? Because sometimes getting to say you want to do origination of a case to first touch response, that time, it might be, do we not have enough agents, or is it the system takes too long? We need to tweak that and make that one click, or we need to maybe integrate with another product that's going to give us better screen pops or something like that, right? So a lot of these can be understood. And you start to tweak these, and that's how you get to that ideal state that you're going to constantly be working on. The ideal state is elusive, in that, you can always be better. But these are great ways to both break up the metrics, because the business metrics are great. They're the ones you can take out, and you can go to management and those, above you and say, look, we're doing great with this. We want to expand. We want to reinvest. We need more resources to make this even better because we're going to get better sales, better profit, better customer satisfaction. The operational are ones that you can learn internally so that you're tweaking the system to do better on the ones on the left, right? So they kind of a benevolent cycle there. So getting started, what are the things that you need to do? If you're close to a decision, or even if you've made a vendor decision, you gotta, you don't just rush into the deployment technology, right? Again, you gotta plan your design. You want to build, you want to modify architecture. Like I said, you got to be using a platform, and you need to be understanding, how all these pieces are going to play into each other and how workflow might tie them together. So again, a lot of times you're going to map business processes, and you're not doing this in technology first. It's a little more evolved than cocktail napkin, but you want to whiteboard. You want to discuss, you want to bring in stakeholders, you want to make sure the right people are plugged into these processes, and that you're not just automating existing manual processes, you're transforming them using technology to make them better. It's not just, if someone writes down a manual order and then literally has to walk it down the hall and hand it to that person, you are transforming a bit by saying, okay, well, I could have them put the order in the system and then they hit save and it gets routed to that person. But hey, why don't we put web forms together that get automated as leads that become orders, and then the lead automatically convert. There's other different ways that you're actually making it where you're taking even more steps out of the equation, where someone doesn't even have to call your company with an order, that kind of thing, making it more efficient for the customer, transforming their experience, right? Another one is mapping the customer journey. Now that's a big one. You want to get a lot of people involved with that because you really want to identify gaps, understand the customer journey today, and then what you want it to be. A lot of people haven't mapped their customer journey, and a lot of times people do, and then they don't do anything about it. The important thing is to map it and then tie it back to that business process flow that you're doing. And a lot of this can happen in parallel. I mean, I know this isn't necessarily a chronological left to right. You've been doing a lot of these in parallel because they're going to feed each other. What you learn from mapping the business process and the customer journey is going to, dictate how you build and modify architecture, the product, right? So additional considerations, again, you want to prioritize certain opportunities in the sense of, how do we score? How do we do other things that, it's not recapitulating the old problems in technology. It's how do I use technology to be better? How do I optimize the limited time that my salespeople have, for example, to make sure they're going after the right opportunities? And that's the great thing about lead management and sales management combined. You can qualify more so that your salespeople reach out later, but at the right time, right? And that's just, aligning sales and marketing. And you really want to define, again, the user experience through a lot of testing, a lot of pre-training, again, building that back to everything you do, because it's important that they really like it and say, okay, well, time people doing something. Okay, if this was a manual process and it took you 4 minutes, but with the technology, you've got to hit open, you got to type this, and it takes 2 minutes, that's great, but can we get it down to 1 minute? Can we really get almost orders of magnitude improvement when you're finally refining this down to the barest minimums and making it a super minimalized, but also super powerful, super intuitive, and super simple user experience. And then finally, when you think about application and data sources to integrate, think about it in a phased approach. All too often, people say, oh no, everyone kind of argues and they say, okay, well, we got to have this data set and this data warehouse needs to be integrated and this system and this, that. And sometimes, really to get the business closed, to get people using it, you might need one ERP or accounting system, whatever it is, integration. And that's the data source that's most important to get things going, to get quick wins, to get people used to the user experience or the UX, the UI of the product, and making them happy so that then you can expand. Again, CRM is an iterative journey. You're going to be adding features. You're going to be adding new departments, sometimes, new divisions. So you don't have to boil the ocean on the first deployment. That's where people start to get into big problems. You start to get over technical on a lot of the integration and the customization and configuration up front. It's really about simplicity first, quick wins. Make sure that you've got a baseline in place where you can go live, people can get the look and feel of the core application, and then build from there. So we talked about the importance of CRM. We talked about the types of things you need to be thinking about in a vendor evaluation. Talked about a lot of the metrics and a lot of the features that matter, and then some of the things you need to be doing and considering about getting started. Now, I want to move on to any of your questions, and feel free to ask questions that are maybe a little out of the scope, but about CRM deployments and vendor evaluation. I'm happy to answer any of those as well. So Tim, I've got my screen up here, but if you can moderate the questions, that would be great.
Yep, we've got a bunch of questions here. So first one was related to the A team you mentioned, assembling the team, I guess, and the question is, I'm not necessarily the decision maker, so how do I help convince management that this is a viable project?
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, one of the important things to do is start to look at the pain, start to analyze the pain, right? So if you can say, okay, well, we're losing, we're buying leads, so we're paying all this money for leads, and we're losing out, on 80 to 90% of them because we're not getting to them fast enough. Because by the time we buy them and then go put them in spreadsheets for people to go call down, they're just old, right? So what is the cost of that? What's the loss of that? And then what's the business? So you can say, now, if we were to put this, even still buy the leads, but push them into a CRM system so that they're immediately into call queues and that there's tools around that for conversion and all that kind of stuff, and take a conservative estimate of, we'll have a 30, 40% improvement because we're able to get to them faster, you can start to monetize the value of fixing the pain. And that's usually the easy thing. And sometimes you don't want to go too big with the numbers. You want to stay conservative so that when you do deploy, hopefully you're over that, and then you're a hero again, right? But there's a number of different ways to show that. Is saying, look at customer attrition numbers and say, okay, hey, we don't have case management so that when people call in, no one knows who they are. They have a bad experience. They can't solve the problem in one or two calls. They can't do manual, they can't do escalations. And it's just a mess. Now, if we lose 20% of our customer base, so now we have to win 20% more customers just to break even, the value of that, the value of saying, let's cut that in half and only lose 10% of our customer base, that's huge. So again, it's about quantifying the value of the pain or the fixing of the pain, and then articulating that in a conservative yet pretty exciting way and saying, look, with these simple additions of case management, of lead management into an opportunity tool that we can deploy in a few weeks or months, we're gonna stop this bleeding pretty quickly. And conservative estimates show great, margin gains in terms of profitability. That's a nice way to articulate it.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Another one related to customer journey. You mentioned customer journey earlier in the presentation. So the question is, who do I need to be including in any sort of customer journey mapping exercises?
That's a good question. What I've seen is it's got to be cross-departmental. Depending on the size of your company, it should be department heads that touch on the customer before and after the sale. And then you have to think about whoever might be involved in this, typically marketing, who is involved with creating the experience that you can't control, right? Who's doing the advertising? Who's doing the websites and things like that, where people might be the banner ads and those types of things. So you need to understand that, because you don't want to have any blind spots. So your customer service and support, your sales, your pre-sales, like I said, marketing, and then what I like to call, your sales operations and fulfillment. Now, a lot of times, you might not have quote unquote fulfillment, but if you deliver or provision products, you install things, those people are really important to the customer journey, right? They're almost critically important. So you want to have the people who manage those people involved so that they can really tell you what the true steps are, and the experience are. And you start to look for time gaps, you start to look for experience gaps. Where are your blind spots inside that customer journey that then you can go and close or fix or optimize? Because that's, just getting those people in the room and thinking about drawing, from one end to the other. And sometimes it's the infinity band because you sell a subscription product or you do a lot of resell or that type of stuff. But the idea is, just building that map, you start to uncover a lot of aha moments, as we like to call them, where you're finding out things that, oh, I didn't know that once we closed this sale, that person didn't get alerted for 3 days. Why isn't it 3 minutes, right? And can the system manage that we're using today? So a lot of different ways to get the right people in the same room, start thinking about the customer journey, finding those gaps, identifying those gaps and aha moments, and then working together after the fact and creating, kind of cross-departmental committees to fix those issues. We worked with a logistics company, kind of the FedEx of the Scandinavian region, and they'd realized, just like as I mentioned before, is once they closed a kind of corporate sale, a B2B experience, because they also do, you can walk in like with FedEx and be a consumer and send something, their contracts and all those things, it took them so long to then start having people send packages that they were losing out on, months of potential revenue. And just by closing those gaps, they increased revenue by like 20% in 1 year or something like that. Amazing results when you start to look at the customer journey, identify those gaps, close them with both kind of policy and technology, and then reap the benefits.
Great, thanks. Another one is related to, I thought CRM was mostly used for improving the sales cycle for our salespeople, not to improve the customer experience. How does that work? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and you can answer that in a number of ways. I mean, one is CRM. CRM really does cover marketing, sales, and support. So when you think broadly about CRM, it's going to touch the customer in interesting ways. When you're leveraging a marketing cloud integrated with your sales cloud, that's a great experience. A great way to align what those people are seeing, what messages are they seeing, what are they responding to, and making sure that sales knows that, so that when they first talk with the prospect, they're not going in blind. They're not saying, "Hey, what are you interested in?" You already know what they're interested in because you saw what things they downloaded, what pages of your website they viewed, all those types of things. On the customer support side, having a really intuitive and nice self-service portal where people can log cases and issues, search knowledge bases with really nice Elasticsearch and natural language processing and all that cool stuff so that they can understand and get the answers they need, or quickly escalate into a call with a service rep. That's a good customer experience, right? That's improving the customer experience versus here's a number on our website, call it. Well, we might not know what you're asking about until 20 minutes in. It's not as ideal as the way I described it earlier. And even from a sales perspective, if you have great mobile tools, if you have great intuitive tools that the employee can use and likes using, they're going to be more effective when they're engaging on the phone because they might have data insights being pushed to them. They're going to be more effective out in the field from a field sales perspective. Like I said, if you're integrating, configure and price and quote on an iPad with your CRM product, and you can see the products and you're kind of collaboratively building a bundle that you're going to then quickly be able to set a quote out that can be e-signed by the prospect right there. That's a great customer experience because you're not bothering the customer. You're not sending them an email. Okay, hey, we talked about this stuff. Now here's the quote. If you can print out the quote, sign it, and fax it back to me. It's like, oh, please. But instead, having that really nice, seamless, frictionless experience, the customer has a better sales experience with you. So there's a lot of different ways that the CRM improves customer experience. But I understand the question. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, sales automation tools didn't improve a customer experience. They just streamlined operations and gave more insight for, management. But that's what's changing. That's why CRM matters more than ever, as I noted in the beginning. Some really cool things you can do to enhance the experience of the customer, even if it's something that your internal users are experiencing primarily. As I like to say, UX, user experience, is great CX, customer experience. Because when the employees that you have love the technology they use, they're happier, they're more productive, and that translates to better experience for the customer all along the life cycle.
Great, thank you. So just a quick time check. We've got about 5 minutes left, probably enough time for 2 more questions. One here, sure. Which has come up a couple times, is we're currently a US-based CRM, but based in Germany or Europe. I have to change because of GDPR. How does Sugar comply with GDPR?
That's great. So we have what we call Sugar CRM has it's not a GDPR module, it's a data privacy module, but it was built with GDPR in mind. So it manages all of your customer deletion requests or privacy requests, whatever you want to call them, right? So if a customer is asking for that, you can delete their personally identifiable information without deleting all the information in the world about that customer, because a lot of times there's certain information that you as a business, if you're doing business with a company from a B2B perspective or even a B2C perspective, you're allowed to have. So if someone doesn't want you to have their Facebook or Twitter name or their phone number or other things, you might have to have their address because you deliver products to them on a monthly basis and they haven't opted out of that. They just don't want you to have certain information. So we can help you manage that. You can create those settings and automate that process. And then what happens is it's completely auditable. So you can do audit reports and all those things if you need to show compliance. And then as I noted earlier, what we create are kind of placeholders inside the application that show value deleted, so that you can essentially kind of lock that field from being filled again unless that person opts in. Other things we do is double opt-in we can manage, so you're not emailing people that you shouldn't be emailing. A lot of different things. We take data privacy very seriously at Sugar CRM, and I think the industry does as well. We've been a little ahead of the pack with that. No one else has a data privacy module. We have that. It's just ready to go out of the system, and it's super simple to use, super intuitive. We even have a role. So part of GDPR is you need to specify who your quote-unquote data privacy manager is. You might not hire a new person, but we can create that role, which comes out of the box in the system for you, and that person gets to see all those requests and manage those requests. So it's a lot of the mandates of that are managed automatically inside Sugar, and it's a pretty cool thing.